Hey, it's me. Hi. I'm Joe Pasevich, and you are who you are. And I'm wearing my Valentine shirt. It is February the 12th, 2025. It is a Wednesday. It's breezy and raw out there today. And our classic winter continues, so enjoy. That's why we love being here. Tell Governor Healy that, there are some of us who are going to stick it out no matter what, despite the thousands of people fleeing this state every month. Despite the thousands of people fleeing this state every month, there are thousands more coming in. And what are we doing with them? Well, we're going to have to find, as it turns out, about $1 billion to take care of these guests. You know, the right to shelter law was passed in Massachusetts many years ago, and it was designed as part of a social safety net for people that were burned out or had some sort of trauma or major change in their life, and they needed a place to live very badly. So we adopted something. I'm very much a social safety net kind of person, believe it or not, that we adopted this law, but now it's being abused. It's being used like a welcome mat. It's being used like an enticement to get people to come here. And of course, there are people getting rich. You know what they say? One way to get rich is off of the poor. And there are so many programs that people are using to get rich. And look at what's happening right now in Washington with DOGE, D-O-G-E, the Department of Government Efficiency that Trump and Musk are collaborating on. They're finding billions and billions of dollars in all kinds of programs and entitlement payments or scheduled regular payments of very questionable characters involved in very sketchy schemes, all right, in order to bilk the government, to bilk you of your hard-earned dollars. So sometimes some of these programs turn into big windfalls, and people's misery and people's problems get exploited so that other people get rich. In fact, Turning Point Savannah Hernandez did some work on sanctuary cities, on the sanctuary city of Boston. And now, by the way, some of these sanctuary city mayors, including Mayor Wu from Boston, are going to be required to show up in Congress, I think coming up like in the next week or two, and they're going to be made to answer questions about how they're handling the immigration crisis, or some people say the illegal migrant crisis, what they're doing about it. And maybe there'll be some insight gained into who among their political allies is actually benefiting from this. You see how that all starts to tie together. Isn't that amazing? The inefficiencies and the abuse of government programs and funds.
What's up, guys? This is Savannah Hernandez in the sanctuary city of Boston, Massachusetts. Now, I came to this area because this is one of 4 cities that is currently making headlines for pushing back against federal immigration law, and I wanted to bring you to one of the hotels that is still actively housing illegal immigrants in the city of Boston. Now, Governor of Massachusetts, Maura Healey, just this week allocated another $425 million in pandemic-era funding to housing migrants through June of 2025. I actually had somebody pose as an illegal immigrant and go into City Hall to try to get an idea of what illegal immigrants are being told here in the city of Boston and what they're being offered.
Ningún policía que trabaja con los federales. La policía no trabaja con los federales. Boston es una ciudad sectaria, 100%. El alcalde también. El alcalde es inmigrante. Sí, es China. Mire, la gente que van a recoger es gente que tiene récord. Sí. Gente que te ha metido en problemas, que están en casos de corte y todo. Pero la gente normal no.
¿Y usted cuánto tiempo tiene con el departamento de policía?
Como 15 años.
¿Tiene 7 años de policía?
Sí.
¿Usted, su familia, de dónde es?
Yo soy salvadoreño, pero viene
de recursos para alimentos. Y todos esos están aquí en Boston, que es donde están dando los vouchers para vivienda. que se llama Metro Housing Boston. Vía esta página es donde hace las citas para que pueda ir un día de esos y exponga su caso y ver en qué tipo de ayuda en caso de vivienda le pueden ofrecer ellos.
Okay.
Para buscar un lugar en donde le puedan aceptar un voucher y Dios primero que le pudiera salir un apartamento. O le pueden dar fondos para que usted dé el entry para un apartamento, o hay edificios que agarran sección 8, le dan el voucher que es un sección 8.
Now, this is a tactic that a lot of these sanctuary cities are using. They will bring migrants a little bit out of the city into hotels just like this one before trying to give them permanent housing and dispersing them throughout the state. Now, I'm focusing in on Boston because we are going to have 4 mayors that are going to be speaking in front of a House Oversight Committee next month regarding their sanctuary policies, more specifically, their pushback against federal immigration law. Those consist of course, the Boston mayor, the Chicago, Denver, and New York City mayor. They're all going to be there next month. Now, some of the main talking points that we keep hearing from these sanctuary city mayors are, well, we can still be compassionate and welcoming without sacrificing public safety. But one of the reasons I brought you guys to this hotel specifically is because here in Boston, for example, their mayor keeps saying that this is one of America's safest cities. In this hotel just a couple weeks ago, an illegal immigrant was arrested with 5,000 grams of fentanyl and an AR-15. This also follows a long string of arrests of illegal immigrants in Boston that have been tied to gangs, that have been arrested for child rape, for murder, for drug distribution. I mean, you even had an illegal immigrant who was arrested for killing an American business owner in Boston. So just an idea of what we are going to potentially be hearing from the mayors during that oversight committee hearing. And also too highlighting the fight between sanctuary cities and now the Trump administration. Of course, we've had Tom Homan come forward and state that any city official who circumvents federal law, who pushes back against illegal immigration laws on the books, will be prosecuted. And we also have our new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, stating that sanctuary cities, just like this one, are going to be cut off from federal funding. She's already suing as well the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago for their sanctuary city policies. So this is an idea of the fight that is currently going on between the federal government and state governments right now in terms of illegal immigration.
And that was Savannah Hernandez. Thank you very much. Well, none of this comes without a cost. There has to be a cost for the people to run these services, to provide these services, to provide the cash payments, to provide the vouchers, to provide the rental or the fees for hotels. I mean, it comes with a cost, and that's why, like I said, we're looking at at least $1 billion, or at least $1 billion that's being tacked onto the state budget right now, when we're under stress already. And add to that the costs of everything else going up. Look at your utilities. Look at your utilities going up. What do they expect us to do? And then they talk about how housing is so hard for people to get. Well, is it a matter of a number of housing units, or is it a matter of the cost of living and taxes around here that's causing that? Why are they using the issue of a housing crisis as kind of a red herring, while at the same time they're employing the clouded pivot strategy of bankrupting the taxpayer and emptying the public coffers? What is going on? What is the motive here? Well, obviously they're looking to get more voters. They're looking to enlist more establishment and primarily Democrat voters. I mean, it's so obvious. It's right in your face. Why? These people, they love power. They think you're smarter than you. And they think that you're not paying attention. They think that by advocating the green energy scam, reducing the possibility for more natural gas to get into Massachusetts, closing Mystic Station, Salem, Cape Cod Canal, the Plymouth nuke plant, by closing all these places, what do they think? And then by investing money into offshore wind, what do they think, like somehow that's going to make life easier for people? What are they talking about? You're hearing about how your Eversource bills are going up? Here's Mike Urban on that subject.
The real reason that bill is so high has to do with a few things, okay? Number one is hidden fees. Number 2, crazy policies. And number 3 is basically corporate mismanagement that the government is allowing to go pretty much unchecked. So I'm going to break this down for you a little bit further so you understand where your money is actually going. If you get your Eversource bill out, this is what I want you to do, okay? You'll see charges that don't just cover the cost of the electricity that you use. And most people, as you know, they don't even realize what they're paying for. A lot of them are on auto pay, and they don't even look at the bills, okay? The first one, there's something called a transmission fee, which could equate to around $50 to $60 per month, all right? And this covers the cost of maintaining the power lines that deliver the electricity from power, they're called power plants, right? Those power plants basically administer the electricity into something called substations. Every state has a substation. Then it goes from the substations to your homes, okay? Now, this is a fee that is regulated federally. But the problem is Massachusetts has shut down almost all of its coal and nuclear power plants over the past decade. So in turn, we are importing more electricity from out of state. And basically what that does is make that transmission fee more expensive. It's all about making things more expensive, right? For you guys, that's all it is. Then there's something called the local delivery fee. And no, there's not some guy with electricity in his backpack going to your meter base and delivering electricity. This basically is around $140 to $150 a month for most customers, okay? This covers the cost of Eversource to basically maintain the hardware, right? The power lines, the poles, the meters, so on and so forth, right? And basically bring the electricity from the substations into your home, okay? Now, this charge is one that is regulated by the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, meaning the Healey administration has the power to reject these increases, at least to my knowledge, okay? Maybe one of you guys knows better than I do. But here's the big one. It's called the public benefits, which is around the same price as the delivery, which could be around $140 to $150. So, what the hell is public benefits? What is this? All right. So this charge is used to fund state mandated energy programs like Mass Save, like low income assistance, and of course, renewable energy projects. Okay. And here's the worst part. You have to pay this fee whether you use it or you don't. Okay. You have to pay it. People are pissed about this, guys. People are pissed. You go to Reddit, you go to Twitter, not like that I like going to those places, but I wanted to see the reactions from a lot of people, and a lot of them have posted their bills in Connecticut as well. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what is going on here? Okay, let me explain. Massachusetts is basically forcing regular customers to subsidize rebates for other people's home upgrades. That could be stuff like heat pumps, insulation, so on and so forth. That's what happens on one hand. On the other hand, your bill goes up. That's basically it, right? So you heard that right. So instead of funding these programs through some levels of alternative methods, I don't know how they could do it, okay? Because if they tax you more, they tax you more. But they should be able to do something. So that would, in some extent, help you guys out if you didn't have to pay for this. But these costs are basically buried in your electric bill. So now you're pretty much paying for other people's energy efficiency programs while struggling to get energy on your own. I'm sorry I'm laughing, guys. It's just absolutely ridiculous. I'm not saying not to help people, okay? I'm not saying that at all. But when you're helping people based on somebody's dime that also needs help, it just doesn't make any sense, okay? So now, like me, you're probably also wondering, how did this happen, right? How did we end up in a situation where the residents of Massachusetts are paying some of the highest energy bills in the country? All right. Well, one reason is Eversource apparently had these crazy investments in offshore wind projects. And from what I've read, they spent billions upon billions of dollars on these projects. And then what had ended up happening is they sold their stake for hundreds of millions less than expected. So as a result, they effectively lost like $520 million. And to, instead of absorbing that loss as a company normally does, they're passing it on directly to the consumer. So if you weren't upset already, Massachusetts has spent the last decade, as I said earlier, shutting down traditional energy sources like the coal and the nuclear, okay? And without having like a real plan to replace them. So our state has, to some extent, essentially blocked new natural gas pipelines, even though 75% of our electricity comes from natural gas. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. So in turn, Massachusetts now has one of the most unstable and expensive energy markets in the country, okay? This is like a pet project, and all of you guys are like beta testing this, okay? It sucks. Me too, right? So now we don't have enough energy supply. We don't have the right infrastructures, and rather than fixing the problem, the government is just letting the utility companies charge whatever they want to basically cover bad investments to some extent, okay? The other thing is, I want to talk about something. I know this video is probably long. I apologize, but I want to talk about this as well, okay? So Maura Healey has had a role in quite a bit of this, okay? That Department of Public Utilities, they had every opportunity to reject the rate hikes. I don't know if they did. If somebody knows better than me, let me know. Based on what I was reading and the data I was provided, it didn't seem to have much pushback, right? They had the power to say no. They could have at least tried to have had Eversource fix its own financial mistakes, but it seems as though we're stuck paying for them. It's unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up, guys.
And do you see a pattern here? What do you see when a government or a certain hive mind or philosophy gets in power, begins creating regulations like MBTA zoning, begins an energy zoning and building codes policies that are basically designed to reduce your options and increase your costs, take away your discretionary funds, increase your taxes, bringing in, again, using the right to shelter laws like kind of a welcoming mat or as a tool to further take away your power, to disenfranchise you. Do you see a pattern here? Do you see, is it socialism? Is it communism? Is it some new hybrid of these kinds of things? You know that we saw that with the MBTA Communities Act, what a massive takeover that is. And we know now that this is not just about the MBTA communities. Did you know that last year Healey started a program, a plan, her and her crew started a plan called A Home for Everyone, Massachusetts statewide housing plan. So this MBTA Communities Act is a canard. It's a way to start the ball rolling. You see that guy behind Healey there? That's Ed Augustus. He works at EOHLC. You know where each EOHLC is? They kind of promulgate the regulations that oversee operations like housing authorities. And full disclosure, I am a commissioner on the local housing authority. And I was told when I became a housing commissioner that I could go to EOHLC, that I had a liaison at EOHLC that would talk to me whenever I had a question or a problem. Where are they? It was like a 10 or 20% chance I'd even get an answer from them when I had an issue. And I'm supposed to be doing my job, exercising my fiduciary responsibilities as a commissioner, to ask questions to make sure money is being spent wisely and that the mission of the housing authority is being carried out, which I fully believe in. We need public housing. We need the kind of public housing we have in Marshfield, 100 plus units basically. All right, we need that. And when I go to meetings and I see items on the agenda, like here's one from the agenda. I may be like weaving a little bit here, but stick with me. There was an item on our agenda last week. Motion to authorize the executive director to execute amendment number 14. Amendment number 14. That would imply that there have been 13 other amendments to this project prior to that. To the contract for financial assistance in the amount of $718,387.50. Is that an amended amount? Is that an added amount? Is that now the new total for the projects being referenced? I don't know. I asked the question at the meeting. If you want to watch the Housing Authority meetings, they're taped and they're on the archives. They're on Marshfield Community Media channel. You can watch them. I asked the question, what's the 718 number? What does that represent? And what are the amendments that have to be made now? What are they? I said, I'm not going to vote for this if I don't have answers to these questions. The other four board members, then the representative from the Quincy Housing Authority made a speech saying, oh, we got to vote for it or the residents will freeze and they won't be able to flush their toilets. You know, stuff like that, scare tactics. I said, yeah, but can't you just find out what this is for? Nobody knew. Nobody had an answer. The other four board members voted for it. See, you're like me, folks. You've got to be the person that steps into the breach. You've got to be the person that asks questions and stays involved. Because they'll run roughshod over you. Maura Healey and that whole crew. And like I said, if you want to understand Marshfield, look at what's happening in Washington or what's happening in the state level. And if you want to understand what's happening at the state or national level, look what's happening in Marshfield. So if nobody asks these questions, they've got the ball rolling. They still have momentum. What the damage is that they've done to this town and to this country and this state is so massive, it's going to take not just one administration to reverse the damage, to stop it. First slow the snowball down. You get this 80-foot diameter, 365,000 ton snowball. You got to slow it down. And now you've got to find a way to push it back or break it up. Like Lenin said, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The communists always knew that if their ultimate goal of the workers' paradise and worldwide communism was going to be realized, you had to really, when you had the power, you had to, boom, you had to kill as many people as you could, literally, and put as many of your cronies and hacks into position and take over so much of the apparatus of government and society and church to effectuate all those changes and make them last. But Lenin always recognized that there were going to be setbacks. So hence the slogan, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. In other words, 2 steps forward, and then you've got people on the edge of revolution. You know that the United States was on the verge of a revolution 4 years ago. People were ready to flip the apple cart. And in a sense, the establishment is now relieved that Trump had got elected, because now it's the 1 step back. Let the people calm down a little bit now, all right? We still have our people in place. We still have our programs. We still have our kickbacks coming in. So Healey started a program called A Plan for Everyone. So this is very far-reaching and long. They are thinking in the long term. The plan was developed with the Housing Advisory Council. The Housing Advisory Council. That's something else new, which Healey formed by executive order. She formed a new bureau without telling you. There's something called the Housing Advisory. I wonder how much they're being paid. I wonder what their task is, what their mission is. They're talking about the construction and preservation of 65,000 housing units, ultimately over 220,000 within the next 10 years. That's why the MBTA Communities Act. MBTA is just a canard. They're just saying MBTA, and they're tying it into the need to have housing next to rail and bus lines, when the rail and bus lines don't actually function in support of housing, or the expansion of housing, or the expansion of so-called affordable housing. And this isn't even about affordable housing. This is about making it so you don't have a car. This is about 15-minute cities. There's a lot more to this, and it's happening every day. There is no shortage of homes. There's a shortage of money because of taxation, fees, cost of living, all the things driven, many of these things driven by government. And you know, so we're still fighting the MBTA Communities Act, by the way. And I was talking about recently how the town of Shrewsbury had a vote last week. And the vote was to overturn the vote of they have a representative town meeting which voted to adopt the MBTA community zoning. And so the people took up papers, got a petition put together, and forced a referendum vote on what the representative town meeting had done. And so they went to the ballot, and they won. They got 61% of the vote to overturn the adoption of the MBTA Communities Act, which was done by their representative town meeting. They won. Oh, but there's kind of an obscure act of the House of Representatives that says you need 20% of the electorate, of the actual registered voters, to show up to overturn the outcome of a representative town meeting. So they won the vote, but they did not reach the threshold of overturning and negating the action of the representative town meeting. Listen how Maura Healey describes what happened up there.
Just with what we did last year in our tax package, we gave tax credits to developers who in gateway cities were going to be developing more housing. And just with that action, we've already increased housing production in gateway cities by 600%. So we've been able to move the needle some on this already. ADUs, for example, this is like your garage. You can convert into a housing unit that you could rent, for example. If we did that in 1 year alone, we could bring online 8,000 to 10,000 housing units. Okay, so you know there's a lot of ways we can get there. We're out there enforcing the MBTA Communities Act. The good news on all of that, and thank you to Shrewsbury the other night, we're up to 116 communities have said yes to new housing, which is good. This is about vibrancy. This is about growth. This is about economic viability and sustainability for our state. It is not one size fits all. Each community is different in terms of how they want to do the housing. But if we don't build more housing, if we don't bring more housing online, we're going to lose people, we're going to lose employers, and we will suffer.
You're already losing people by the thousands. Why don't you try to figure that out first before you start imposing poorly thought out, half-brained schemes that just make money for developers and the people that support your campaign. Notice how she said there's, with some incentives, in gateway cities, there was a 600% increase in housing production. Would you buy anything from this woman? Would you buy a bag of peanuts from this lady? Never mind like a car or something like that? 600% increase in housing production. Well, what does that translate in terms of number of houses? She won't tell you that. And then she says, thank you. And then she says, oh, look at all the towns that have adopted MBTA zoning. Yeah, under threat, under scare tactics. And most of them, if they've submitted any kind of a plan, they're either in the deepest part of the inner city, with the exception of Boston, which strangely enough has an exemption, or they've adopted areas for MBTA community development in places where they openly admit, like in Marshfield, nothing will ever get built. Or there's like a less than 1% chance that anything will actually ever happen. That's how Norwell adopted the MBTA Communities Act. They said, we're going to pick an area of town where we're sure nothing will ever happen. So she's crowing about that. And then she thanks Shrewsbury. Oh, thank you, Shrewsbury. Oh, thank you, Shrewsbury. For what? They defeated it. They defeated the ballot question. Okay? Now, they didn't reach the threshold to make for an overturn of this town meeting vote, but why is she thanking Shrewsbury? when the vast majority of people that are obviously like really hot about this and want to see something done. By the way, we're working on trying to get some Shrewsbury people here on the show, and hopefully that'll happen in the next couple of weeks. So here you go. Again, here's the pattern, right? They're smarter than you. They've got a 15-minute city plan for you for coming to your neighborhood throughout the state, and they want all of your discretionary funds. In other words, they don't want you to have the freedom to have money to spend on maybe supporting an opposition candidate to Maura Healey, or maybe buying a car and taking a ride across the country or doing something like that. They don't want you to have that freedom. What is this? This is a form of some kind of dystopian communistic state. I'm sorry to sound like, well, call me what you want to call me, but that's it on the face of it. And so much of your money, again, go back to reference to DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, so much of your money, millions, billions, gone where? To what? Do you know about these things? Look at the scandal around one of the big agencies that's found to be a massive sink, money sink, USAID. Full disclosure, I've worked on USAID stuff when I was working overseas. I know a little bit about it. I told people long ago what we were doing to try to gain control of the social and political and economic spheres in other countries was not going to end well. And now I can just go, told you so. And I feel more free to actually talk about something, but I can't talk about the methods we used. But I feel more free to talk about it now. And it's so great that it's getting the exposure that it's getting. Mike Benz, who worked for the State Department, did a interview with Tucker Carlson. And he's kind of hard to follow because he's got this 30,000-foot view of how this whole scheme, this whole web works, okay? And who am I? I'm just like a coffee boy on a little tiny project here, okay? But here's Mike Benz talking to Tucker Carlson. See if you can follow along with the thinking, the thought process here.
The scope of our dirty deeds done through USAID and State Department grants and through CIA covert activity that is only made possible because they're working with assets whose budget is funded by USAID or budget is funded by state or budget is funded by the National Endowment for Democracy or others. A lot of that work is just liaising with assets that are there. They don't have that big a budget. USAID is a 3 times bigger budget than the CIA. And so they depend on working with State Department USAID cultivated assets. And so we're going to have to disentangle this whole spider web in order to form a cohesive foreign policy vision that isn't evil.
And I think that's the point, that isn't evil. Because, in our system, I really think in any system, even a monarchy, the people have to think that in general the government is, doing things they approve of, isn't actively evil, isn't, in business with the drug cartels in Mexico, which our government is, as you know. Because if the people of a country don't think their own government has legitimacy, it can't last very long. Right. It doesn't last, right?
Right. No, absolutely.
So, are you concerned that when people learn, what's going to happen when these stories penetrate, that yes, your government has been paying to wreck a lot of other places and, is working against you using your money? It's kind of hard to unknow that. Right.
And thank goodness, because we're going to need that level of national consciousness about these scandals in order to create the moral buffer against the temptation to be evil again.
That's exactly right.
And so I do think that this is all because this is a dogfight to the bone. We are going to be at every level, every year in the budget, there's going to be this fight. Now, and here's the question: how much more does the State Department get in the budget? Since had like a $35 billion budget, now it's getting USAID's $44 billion. But what fraction of that is Trump going to? I've been saying here for a long time, because everyone talks about how USAID is funneling things to left-wing causes. And it's very easy to see that. We talked about the 97% of employees at USAID who donate to Democrats. But to me, the main issue here is the remnant of internationalist Republicans in Congress who can form a critical majority bloc in the House or in the Senate in order to get their way on this issue. Like you could see a situation where their own vested interests, their own constituents are so dependent on either USAID's funding or the results of USAID operations that they will side with the Democrats in order to inflict damage on the Trump White House,
of course,
budget vision. And so that's going to be a constant fight. And what I'm hoping evolves over the next weeks and months is a moral North Star for America First, nationalist or populist or MAGA or centrist or simply reasonable liberal or center left folks, where you have the current level of American prosperity, you remove that evil in the labyrinth of lies. Something needs to fill that gap. Like we talked about in the oil and gas spaces, drill baby drill for oil. Okay, but now do that for semiconductors. And now do that for every critical mineral. And maybe the answer is, what I've been trying to sell is that if you're going to do the dirty deeds and you do believe they're necessary for statecraft, then there has to at least be an obligation to be honest about them. I thought it was very honest, when Lindsey Graham finally came out and said the strategic vision of the United States is the $14 trillion worth of natural resources. Relying on the humanitarian predicate for it allows voters to be deceived and for them to then turn around and feel totally hoodwinked when they find out that, hey, why are you paying for the unions, the media companies, things that are acting here on the homeland? We have this tumor that we're removing from the body of the American project. But there was blood flowing into that, and it's connected to all these arteries. The thing that I want to make sure happen that is midwifed appropriately is, what are you changing about our foreign policy structure so that when you remove the tumor, the blood still flows in the way that you want it to. You're not ripping the heart out with open heart surgery.
I get it. I'm just less confident than you are that we're reaping some massive reward for this. I remember people muttering darkly about, the purpose of the Iraq War in 2003 was to seize the oil in Iraq. Well, that didn't happen. Didn't happen in Libya. I don't. It's hard to. I guess I don't have a clear picture of the material benefits that we're receiving.
Well,
from this.
look at the benefits to the stock price for Chevron and Exxon when the war broke out, and the U.S. State Department strong-armed every country in Europe to divest from Russian gas, and they all were forced to buy expensive North American LNG. Their stock prices went to the moon. They had something like triple the profits or something for a certain period of months, following that, and reap these windfall benefits. This is, we're sort of confronting the ghost of Ronald Reagan here, because the reason you do that for statecraft purposes is trickle down economics. What's good for ExxonMobil is good for the American citizens. And so if a dirty deed done to advance, big oil, big ag, big tech, whatever it is, anything that's good for them is good for us. And so anything that the U.S. government can do in the form of overt or covert diplomacy or covert influence in the region that tips the scales in favor of those U.S. corporate interests or U.S. multinational interests will ultimately trickle down to the people itself. That's the logic.
Mike makes a good point there, and I can identify 100% with it, because when we were working overseas in places like Russia, it was like, well, we're doing something because it's for America. I want to be able to walk around Ukraine thinking, hey, if somebody gives me a hard time, hey, could you send a Reaper over to so-and-so town? Some people are giving me a hard time. Yeah, we were the conquerors. We were great. But the point is that we weren't being honest with what we were doing, not only to our own people, but to their people. Does that engender trust and better relations? No. And a bunch of people are getting filthy freaking rich off of these projects and these programs, which is wrong too. There's no accountability because it's all being kind of done in the shadows. So even more erosion of trust happens. Look at what we just went through with COVID, the lying and the gaslighting that we went through, the lies, and the people that were making money hand over fist off to the side. Look at this exchange between Rand Paul and Samantha Power, I know.
Ms. Powers, did USAID fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
We did not fund gain-of-function research,
That's not the
as
question.
you know.
The question is, did you fund coronavirus research in Wuhan, China?
Before my time, there was the PREDICT program with which you're familiar, which ended in China in 2019.
Now, this is a $200 million program, and the GAO has also identified that some of these grants went directly to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where there is a suspicion that the lab leak began the pandemic. Has USAID awarded funds to the Academy of Military Medical Sciences in China?
Not to my knowledge, but I'd have to get
I think the answer is once again yes. GAO has found that there have been subawards of NIH money as probably as well as USAID money that went to the Academy of not just medical research, military medical research in China. Now, part of the unknowns here is we can't get the records to look at this. So I've been asking for months and months for records. In September of last year, I wrote Ms. Powers, USAID, a request asking for records from the PREDICT program. These are not classified. These are simply records of scientific research, and we want to read the grants to find out what they were doing and whether the research was dangerous or not. The response I got from your agency was, USAID will not be providing any documents at this time. They're just unwilling to give documents on scientific grant proposal. We're paying for it. They're asking for $745 million more in money, and we get no response. So 2 weeks ago, the ranking member, Risch, myself, and 25 other Republican senators, unfortunately, so far, signed a letter once again. It's still no response. We're not asking for classified information. We're not asking for anything unusual. 20 million people died around the world. You're supposed to be an agency that cares about the death of people around the world. We, talk about starvation and famine, and 20 million people died from a virus, and you won't give us the basic information about what grants you're funding around the world and who you're funding. Should we be funding the Academy of Military Medical Research in China? They're now off limits. But did we fund them? And who was making the decision? You know who ran the PREDICT program? UC Davis. Have you had any conversations with UC Davis about research in China and whether it was advisable?
So again, to set the record straight, first of all, the PREDICT program ended in 2019. We have people
and yet it goes on in other forums and other names.
That's certainly not USAID program.
Well, you have a program called Emergency Pandemic Threats Program still, don't you?
If I could just finish in response to the first set of allegations, we have provided hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents related to the PREDICT program for the very reason that you say, because we are in broad
Not to
agreement.
us.
We are, again, as I know you had an exchange with Secretary Blinken as well, consistent with longstanding practice.
Not going to give them to us.
We have been responsive to the committees of jurisdiction.
Not going to. You've been consistent in not giving us any information.
That's not true.
But what you're
we've
saying
provided
is,
hundreds of pages in response to the Karen
whom?
ranking.
To
the
whom?
Senate, Homeland Security, and Government Affairs Committee, for example. We've had extensive
we've been requesting this and
engagement with
gotten none of it. I'm on that committee as well. The thing is what we get from you and from the State Department at large is that if Senator Menendez signs it, you'll give it documents. Until then, you'll give us nothing. And we have got nothing, zero. You said will not be providing any documents. I now have 25 senators have sent you a letter, and you aren't responding.
Well,
And
we certainly
we
respond.
want to see the scientific grants. We give you the money, the taxpayers give you the money. We deserve to know where the money went, whether it happened. Look, you're right. It ended in 2019. When did the virus come about? In about 2019. some of the research proposals that came about in 2018 were Wuhan Institute of Virology asking for money to create a virus with a furin cleavage site in it, a coronavirus, a SARS-like virus with a furin cleavage site. That's exactly what COVID turned out to be. They wanted money to create such a virus. So we want to know, are there other research proposals that you either granted or denied that were on the same veins of creating viruses that could have become COVID-19? We can't tell because you won't give us the information.
Again, consistent with longstanding practice, we are providing extensive documentation. We have a whole
That's
team of
just
people who
not
do
true.
nothing other than
That's
look
just
back
not
and
true.
predict.
That is not
It
true.
is factually accurate.
That is
It
not
is. The
true.
fact that-
Everything we have asked, we have not gotten. I have not seen one document on the PREDICT program.
I understand that, again, consistent with common practice
Consistent
across
that you're not going to give it
administration.
to any senator.
No, we're providing all of the kinds of documentation that you're
You are
describing.
not. You're
we
being
are.
dishonest.
We-
You're being
No, I'm
dishonest.
not. I'm
We haven't
absolutely
gotten
not.
one scrap of paper from you. Not
There-
one
again,
scrap of
with
paper.
the committees of jurisdiction, we are providing all of the paperwork that
You are not.
requested by the
I'm on
chair
the
and
other
ranking.
committee. I'm the ranking member on the
Well-
other committee, and I haven't seen a scrap of paper from that committee either.
Well, that is.
See, here's what the American
I can tell you
people.
what has happened.
The American
Actually,
people.
I can't tell you what
the
happens
American
at the committee.
people think this: that because you won't respond, and because you respond with a non-response, that you have something to hide. I don't know if you have anything to hide or not. I want to see every grant proposal that had to do with coronaviruses that went to China from the U.S. government, from all facets of the U.S. government, and every bit of the Biden administration is stonewalling us and will not give us the information. It makes us think and makes us suspicious that you're hiding something. And it wasn't even you. This was the previous administration. We go back 2 or 3 administrations. We just want to see the information, and yet you sit there and you say we will do something, we are doing something, which is absolutely the opposite of the truth. You are not being honest.
You are not being honest. When I watch Rand Paul going through what he's going through, I picture myself at a housing authority meeting sometimes, or at a town meeting here in Marshfield, or at a select board meeting, or someplace where you get a chance maybe to say a word or two. And then to have someone like our town administrator say, "Oh, you're engaging in misinformation again," when I'm proven to be 100% right. But I just like feel the frustration that we just saw between that exchange between Powell and Rand Paul. God, it's incredible. Again, it's at all levels. And no wonder why there's such distrust. You know, I remember the day JFK was shot. That's how old I am. But I was really young. But it made such an impression on me. And I've grown up with that my entire life. I've grown up with seeing strife in the city of Boston and other places. I've been around different places in the world, witnessed just terrible things, you know? And I'm a person with some empathy, believe it or not, despite the allegations of the people saying what a mean person I am, you know? And really, there's a crisis of confidence. Tina from Caswell Street at town meeting last year talked about the reasons why people don't trust the government. Now, we have something called the Government Oversight Committee, which is being set up to investigate things like JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, USOs, UFOs, you know, different things like that that are obviously creating a stir and raising a lot of suspicions and questions from the populace for decades, since I was a little boy. And we've grown up with this kind of atmosphere all around us. All these years, all these decades. It's got to stop. Listen, now Representative Luna, she's a little bit, you know, out there, okay? But she looks like the right person for this job. Listen to the presentation.
When our founding fathers stood against tyranny, they did not merely oppose taxes. They defended the sacred idea of individual sovereignty. They declared that no government, agency, or title could infringe upon the freedoms of speech, religion, thought, and the pursuit of truth. For too long, the American spirit has been dimmed by a veil of secrecy, by a government that has grown too comfortable in the shadows, denying us the transparency we deserve. But today, we stand at the dawn of a new era where the light of truth begins to shine through. A few weeks ago, President Donald Trump made a historic announcement. With the stroke of a pen, he committed to declassifying the files concerning the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a decision not just monumental, but pivotal. It is with profound honor that I have been entrusted by Speaker Mike Johnson and Chairman James Comer to lead the House Oversight Task Force on Declassification of Federal Secrets. Together with the help of the White House, our intelligence allies, the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, we will be conducting investigations into the following: the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list, the origins of COVID-19, and the 9/11 files. This task force will be a beacon of bipartisanship. On the Republican side, Representatives Burchett, Boebert, Burleson, Crane, Gill, and Mace will be joining me, although I'd like to note that I'm expanding this to the entire governing body and will be allowing certain members to waive on. Our first hearing is set for March. The date will be announced soon, and we've already initiated close to a dozen communications with various agencies, to include Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State. This will no longer be a task force that makes bold promises only to fade into irrelevance or send strongly worded letters. This will be a relentless pursuit of truth and transparency, and we will not stop until the American people have the answers they deserve. We will cut through the bureaucracy, challenge the stonewalling, and ensure that the American people finally get the truth that they have been denied for too long. Our first investigation will be announced, but it's going to be covering on a thorough investigation into the John F. Kennedy assassination. And I can tell you, based on what I've been seeing so far, the initial hearing that was actually held here in Congress was actually faulty in the single bullet theory. I believe that there were two shooters, and we should be finding more information as we are able to gain access into the SCIF, hopefully before the files are actually released to the public.
All these unanswered questions on every level, all these unanswered questions, it leaves people off-balanced, disillusioned, disenfranchised. It makes them give up. It makes them think that things are hopeless. So why participate? Why vote? Maybe that's why the people of Shrewsbury didn't turn out in the necessary numbers, even though there's obviously a massive majority up there that's against the MBTA community zoning. But maybe those people haven't evolved enough and haven't begun to care enough that they said, let somebody else handle it. Remember Jim Fitzgerald in Marshfield years ago, when there was a lot of criticism about the low turnouts, and there still is low turnout, crazy low turnouts. We saw with the election of Eric Kelly a really unusually high turnout. Had we finally reached people? Had a certain critical mass been obtained, at least in the collective consciousness, to make people say, well, now, wait a minute, something's not right here. The way they're treating the last couple of fire chiefs, the way they just kind of string the teachers along, the way they're like assigning fees and being not so transparent about where all the money is, the way they kind of hide or try to fog your lenses over the amount of free cash and the amount of surplus that the town has been raking in the last few years, while still increasing your taxes and fees. You know, maybe something's not right here. So maybe we reached a critical mass with that last election. But Jim Fitzgerald used to say, oh, we have low turnouts because people are just happy with the way things are. Oh, really? They're just happy? There's no disillusionment, there's no passivity, there's no disengagement or anything like that? What do you think, people? I think there is. And again, maybe that's why the people of Shrewsbury didn't turn out in the necessary numbers. So there are people of a hive mind with a lot of plans for you and your future and the future of your state and country. And it's going to be a lot of work to kind of turn things around. But in the meantime, a lot of money has gotten into their pockets. And on some of these national and even international efforts, they said last week, and I laughed because I knew all about it, I was there, I experienced it. 80% of the so-called independent journalists in Ukraine are funded partially by USAID. So yeah, and, you know? And what happens is some of these media agencies and these other non-government agencies, and we had contact with Soros and other institutes. Some of that money gets back into the United States and gets into the organizations that then also have an arm or a branch or operatives that are working domestically in this country, pushing things like the Russiagate and other things in order to discredit and scandalize opposition people, naysayers, venom-spewing naysayers with cable TV shows. So some of that money gets all the way back around. So it's all connected. That's the sum right there. It's all connected. The only way to break this spider web, as I think that was it Ben's talked about, and the only way to restore trust is for you to get involved. Here's what remember George Shaw? Listen to what George Shaw said on the subject.
I made a prediction to a couple of people. I says, write a letter. There are boards that have no members on them. If you write a letter to this Board of Selectmen, I will guarantee you that there'll be 5 other letters in that file, and you will be passed over. And it's happened more than once. That's what they do. They want their people into control.
They want their people into control. As Bob Parkus used to say, the select board members, the selectmen, are selected, elected, and then directed. And when you look at someone like Lynn Fiddler, a tool, or Steve Darcy, who's just like a Democrat automaton, he's like a wind-up doll. You know, there should be a Steve Darcy doll. It's like it's just a big wind-up doll that the Democrat establishment just puts in a chair, and you just like a Chatty Cathy. You know, those dolls where you had the string in the back and you pulled the string. Hi, tell us, what is the Democrat Party and our town administrator doing for the good of the community lately? It's just like the same old recitations. It's like a disc embedded in his body or something, or in his brain, that just recites the same platitudes and the same slogans. And Lynn Fiddler looks like a fish out of water. I mean, she's like a fish out of water. It's like she's always gasping for air because it's like she's searching for something to say. But you've got to have something inside of you, in your heart and your mind, in order to be able to talk. And I think that's what the impediment is that there is nothing there. And that, you may say, oh, that's awfully harsh criticism, Joe. I've been observing it for a very long time. And tell me, next time you engage and watch a meeting, and you'll see the wind-up doll pull the string on the back of Steve Darcy's back, all right? And he'll just recite the same things. And you'll see Lynn Fiddler, Bob, what do I say? It just can't go on. It can't go on. People out there have got to apply, like George Shaw said, get on a board or a committee, run for something, and vote for some naysayers. We might have some good guests next week. Happy Valentine's Day.